Welcome to Conversations with David Ibarra. Today, our guest is Jorge Fierro from Rico Brands. This will be episode 3. So, welcome, Jorge, to our program.
Thank you so much for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Listen, I thought today that our episode is going to be all about small business, opportunity, obstacles overcome. And I wanted to share your story with our audience. I'd like to talk to a little bit from the very beginning. You're from, and what made you come to the United States? You're from Mexico City, I believe?
I'm from Chihuahua State,
Okay.
northern Mexico.
Okay, perfect. Tell us exactly about what was the motivation to come to the United States.
Well, once again, first of all, I want to thank you for this invite. I'm excited about your podcast, and I cannot wait to see what other guests you have in this program. However, let me tell you, I am originally from Chihuahua, Mexico. I tend to say that my spirit is an entrepreneurial spirit, and I went through my school years in Mexico, in Chihuahua, to be precise. But along the way, I wasn't content and I wasn't happy with what I was doing. I needed to do something else other than just doing the basic, which is be a good student, be a good Catholic boy, be a good son, be a good athlete. I Some of us have more than just that, and I wanted to explore, and I wanted to do it my way. And so one day I decided to stop going to university in Chihuahua. I went for Christmas to see my parents in Delicias, Chihuahua, my hometown where I was born. And I proceeded to tell my father that I was quitting university. I was in second year of law school, and I decided not to finish my career. My father couldn't understand why. He says, "You have everything that you need. I mean, what are you gonna do?" And I said, "Well, that since I was very young, I have always admired the philanthropic mind that Americans have, and that always kind of caught my attention. And so I thought, you know what? Maybe I should go over there and figure out why there's such a philanthropic people in America. I wanted to know, what motivated Americans to be such a great people in the world. And lastly, I wanted to do my own thing. I didn't really want to depend on, my career. I didn't want to depend on family business.
Right.
So I just clean one day, just crossed the border and came up to America. And I wanted to come a little deeper into America. I remember my father says, "Well, a friend of mine lives in Santa Ana, California. Why don't you go over there? I'm sure that you can have a job." But I didn't want any of it. I wanted to have my own experience. I wanted to live my own experience. I wanted to grow my own um, journey along the way, and I was up to it. Coming from university, I mean, I didn't know what to expect. I
Right.
spoke no English. I didn't know anybody, and I didn't have a penny in my pocket.
So, where did you decide to go?
Well, first of all, I came with a friend of mine, Jorge Torrellamas, which is no longer with us.
Mhm.
He passed away. Pretty rich kid from my hometown, and we decided to come. I end up arriving in Rawlins, Wyoming.
Rawlins, Wyoming.
Rawlins, Wyoming. I had no idea what my journey was shaping to at all whatsoever. But as I said from the beginning, I was up for the ride. And so my friend Jorge went back to New Mexico, and I stayed in Rawlins, Wyoming. And I remember this tiny little restaurant, Mexican restaurant. And I went in there to talk to him and see if I could find a job as a dishwasher. And the guy that owned the restaurant, an old Chicano guy, he spoke enough Spanish for us to communicate.
Mhm.
And he mentioned that his son was married to a very wealthy woman from that town, and they had a lot, large ranches. Well, to make it short, I ended up becoming a sheep herder in Wyoming.
Wow.
Yeah. So talk about a kid from university
Going to be an attorney decides to be a sheep herder.
waking up one day with your horse and your dog, right? And I mean, talk about once again the journey. However, I have always, embraced my journey because it's so mine,
Yeah.
and it made me grow and made me see things from a different perspective. So, anyways, I landed in February, which is one of the
Right.
coldest months in Wyoming,
Yeah.
in 1985, and I worked as a sheep herder for a few months. Finally, came down to the town. I went to their high school, and I cannot remember how I asked if they had an ESL program, and they said, "Well, we don't have an ESL program, but if you go to Salt Lake City, which is very close from here, they have great schools. They have great, a lot of work. The economy is incredible." So I decided one day to come to Salt Lake City, Utah.
So how did you come? Take a bus, or how did you get to Salt Lake City?
It's quite unique though, because anywhere in the world, anywhere you go, you come across people who speak Spanish. And so
Huh?
I came across some Mexican guys in Rawlins, Wyoming, and they were to tell me that a friend of theirs was driving to Salt Lake City in his truck, and said, if you give him enough money for gas, he'll take you down to Salt Lake City. So I arrived in Salt Lake City in August of 1985, and I landed at the Pioneer Park at the Rescue Mission back in the days,
Right.
and that's how my life and my
So
career
you
started in
stayed at
Utah.
the rescue mission overnight?
So I stayed at the rescue mission for maybe about 10 days,
Uh-huh.
and I would get up early in the morning, five in the morning, and I would go to SOS camps and lined up to be sent to do a job, and I was paid every day. Every day I would make $24.75, and that would allow me to eat, and that would allow me to pay $3 to stay at the shelter,
Wow.
at the men's shelter, and I started my career and my life in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Now, you entered over at the Pioneer Park. Now, if I understand it, that you started your business in that same park. Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, you know, uh, weird sometimes how life works, but yes, I landed at the Pioneer Park, and I remember back in the days, the men's shelter was across east of Pioneer Park, and Rescue Mission is just around the corner from Pioneer Park. And in 1997, I went to Pioneer Park to start selling beans, fully cooked, ready to eat pinto beans, at the downtown farmers market, and it happens to be at the Pioneer Park. So it's
Wow.
just right in the same spot that I landed a few years prior.
Now, what gave you the idea to sell cooked beans at farmers market in Pioneer Park?
Well, as I said in the beginning, I have always had, you know, the idea that I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to explore. Never to mention, I come from a business background. My father and my mother owned business in Mexico, so I was raised in that environment,
Mm-hmm.
and so I feel and I think that I have an entrepreneurial soul. And I remember I called my father and my mother, and I said I want to start my own business, and I want to sell beans. The way that my mom used to do it in Chihuahua, Mexico. She had one of her companies that she started was, fully cooked, ready to eat pinto beans. No preservatives, no additives, refrigerated. And so back in Mexico, I mean, we all eat beans, and now in Utah, we eat beans because of Rico, right?
Right.
And so I decided that I was going to start selling beans at the farmers market. And my father and my mother came to Utah, and my mother gave me the idea of selling this creamy salsa. Well, when my father and my mother were in Utah, my mother said to us, I'm willing to, cook for you guys Monday through Saturday, but then on Sunday it's on you, Jorge. Sundays, you either gonna take us out to a restaurant, you're gonna either bring food in, or you're gonna cook for us. And so I decided to go to a supermarket and start looking at some items to try to assemble a dinner together. And I just couldn't believe that we don't have, or back in the days, we really didn't have a lot of Mexican products ready to eat in supermarkets. And that's when the idea came up about, doing my own thing. I didn't want to open a Mexican restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of us Mexicans end up coming to America and opening a Mexican restaurant. But I decided that I was going to do it differently. And I wanted to be able to sell something to a lot of people instead of selling a lot of things to one person all the time. I wanted to engage in a bigger market,
Hmm.
and supermarkets came to mind. And so as simple as making the product, labeling the product, and knocking in doors day in and day out
Where
until
where was it that you found a place to develop the product, cook the product, package the product, and then get it entered into a grocery store? Where did this take place?
well, I started making the beans in my apartment, and in order for me to be able to put it in markets, I had to find a commercial kitchen.
Right.
Then on the way to walking to the supermarket on 8th South and 9th East, we always came across a little corner on 8th South and 5th East that a good friend of mine is very familiar with,
That's true.
and end up renting that place, and later became Rico Market. And obviously, not until later when you and I met, and I told you about that, you told me the story about that little market.
Well, that was the market that I lived right behind the year that I lived, 7 years old, I believe, in Salt Lake City. And of course, there's a couple of stories about that little market that we won't talk about today. But
Remarkable.
it did include some mischief,
Yes, indeed.
so to speak.
Which is
So
part of our journeys
so
sometimes.
so you started manufacturing. Tell me about what grocery store was the first one to say yes to you, and how did that happen?
Well, back in the days, they started opening these tiny little markets called Orchard Street markets,
Hmm.
and the Martindales, one of the Martindales, and the Martindale name was a big name because that was one of the original owners of Smith's markets in Salt Lake
Hmm.
City.
I see.
Then Kroger came in and bought him out, and so one of their sons, Mr. Martindale's son, opened these tiny little markets, and he would call it like a farmer's market. And they were, he was able to open either three or four here in Salt Lake City, and he would open up the doors in the summer and pull the produce out. And it was just like a new concept, and it was called Orchard Street Market. And I was sitting in my little market on 8 South and 5th East, and Martindale came in and said, "Do you have any nutrition facts, and do you have any labels?" And I said, "Yes, yes, of course I do have nutrition facts and labels." And I have always been quick to respond in a very positive way if it is something that is going to be of benefit, opportunities. I
Hmm.
always, you know, try to catch on opportunities. And so when I said that I would have nutrition facts and labels, he immediately says, "Well, I would like to have some of your products in my new markets." And that was the first
Wow.
market where I had Rico brand products at that little
Let
market.
me fast forward just a little bit. So you end up at that little, used to be a bakery, then it
Correct.
becomes your manufacturing, and you had a little retail space out of that. Then you ended up moving to a bigger place because your business grew and you were in more markets, correct? Tell me about moving to a bigger location and where the location was and how long you were there and how you went about building that and where'd you get the capital?
So you're correct. The product started moving extremely well. People started catching on fresh, handmade, authentic, no preservatives, no additives food. God knows that's how the new generations eat.
Right.
Unlike us, we were willing to eat cardboard. But the new generations started catching on the Rico brand, and I started running out of room. And so I decided to start looking for a bigger space. And as an entrepreneur, and as a someone that was building up my business, and as a someone that didn't really have a credit build up, I had to struggle a little bit. So I had to go and look for a place somewhere in the west side. It used to be an industrial area of the west side. Now it's known as the Granary District.
Hmm.
I found this space. It was immense. It was a lot bigger than what I needed. But the owners of that space also, uh, you know, took the opportunity to convince me to move in there at a very, affordable price, 25 cents a square foot. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you never heard that
Right.
again. You'll never heard that again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to move in there. I really didn't have any money. It was hard to find the capital to be able to bring it up to code. So what I did is that with my profits, I started spending money and bringing that warehouse up to code. As you know, we are under USDA, and to be able to meet the requirements, we had to spend probably about a $1.5 million to be able to bring that up to code. But at the same time, uh, I decided to open a restaurant that later on became Frida Bistro,
Mm-hmm.
at the same spot. And all of a sudden, I had 26,000 square feet. I used to manufacture my products there. I used to have the restaurant up front, and then the warehouse became an event center, almost to the point where I would have
Right.
events very often. But I did because a lot of them, I would host events for nonprofit organizations.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this: Is that so? If I interpret this right, you did well on the profit, but the profit went right back into the building to keep it up to code, to keep it maintained, to keep it the way that you wanted it.
That is correct. And not only that, though, but I was making enough profit that the banks started noticing, and I started tapping into very small loans.
Right.
And I was just tapping into those loans to be able to buy new equipment or to
Yeah.
erect another wall or to try
Right.
to do more to increase my revenues.
So the restaurant was going well. You're now in Harmon's, Smith's, and other grocery stores throughout the Rocky Mountains. And then all of a sudden, life is pretty good. And then you get a little surprise. Tell us what happened as far as the surprise, the notice that you received.
Well, let me just mention that for 18 years, myself and another small business made that area extremely desirable.
Mm-hmm.
And growth happens whether we like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
We evolve, uh, gentrification happens. And so last year, 26th of June, I received an eviction notice, a letter. Somebody had purchased the property. I may say though that I tried to buy the 26,000 square feet that I had back in the days, but they were not willing to remove that 24,000 square feet or 26,000 square feet out of 450,000
Right.
square feet location. And so I never had the opportunity to purchase. I didn't have the opportunity to buy because I once again did not have the financial backup that I needed. Otherwise, that place would have been something really incredible by now.
Right.
But anyways, I received a letter on the 26th of June of last year, 2020. And on that letter stipulated that I had 60 days to leave the premises and it was not negotiable. I mean, it's something that you as a business
Right.
owner don't wanna read or see or
Right.
hear. And I just couldn't believe it. I was completely I was very upset. I was very
Yeah.
upset because I thought, wait a minute. I thought that we are pro small business in America, but oftentimes we're not so pro small business in
Mm-hmm.
America.
So you get the notice and you get to work. What do you do?
Well, I got to work. I went to work. I started, making phone calls, and I started freaking out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I call a couple of good friends who have, been through some adversity and growth, and you're just as good as the people that you're surrounded with. And so I call my friend David Ibarra,
Right.
and he says, Jorge, let's put a plan together. We're gonna find a space. And I remember, on a Sunday we visited I don't know how many warehouses and I don't know how many neighborhoods we went to, and you were quick to point the properties that friends owned and still own. We were just going all over the place trying to look for a place, but simply because of the fact that the time that was given was so short, It's
Right.
almost impossible to prepare a place that can meet requirements, USDA requirements, in 60 days. I
Right.
mean, that's completely unheard of.
Unheard of.
Completely unheard of. But at the same time, I was advised to tap into every single friend that I have and people that I done business with. And so I decided to call Kathy Stevenson, the food writer for the Select
Right.
Tribune, and that also, I mean, obviously she was extremely surprised that that had happened. She was quick to write an article that was extremely fair because she never mentioned Rico until the end. In fact, the title is kind of funny because it said a bean and a tortilla factory is in the verge of closing their doors after 22 years because of gentrification. And that caught some people's attention. And one of them was the Pattersons that used to own a small company for 50 years here in Utah, Western Foods
Mhm.
Services. And they called me, they called you and me, and they said, we have a small place. It may work, it may not work, but it's available. And if you want it, you can move in immediately. And we started jumping like little kids and started getting really excited. The next day, we went to see that space and we walked through. And then you quickly came to me and said, "Can you make it work?" And I said, "You know what? I can make it work." And I can make it work thinking at that moment just to save the business, just not to go under, just to quickly run in and start making all the fresh product, absolutely everything that everybody loves, such as rice and beans and pico de gallo, guacamole, and probably some of the most basic Mexican food that we have on our label out of 65 different products. And so we decided that we were going to take on that space. We decided that we were going to try to sign a long-term lease. And my good friend mentor David Ibarra said, "Jorge, make an offer. Try to buy it." I said, "David, I don't have any money." And he said, "Well, you will find some money. And if you don't cannot find any money," he said, "I don't want to do this, Jorge, but I'll buy it. I'll buy it if you need me to. I don't want to do it, but if I have to, I'll buy it in order to save the jobs for the many people that you have working for your company." And at the end of the day, too, it was 22 years of hard work and 22 years of growth in this country, in this community. And as I said, sometimes the journey can be brutal.
Well, let me share this, and since you bring that up, uh, I knew that would never happen. It would never need to happen because you had 23 years of success. You had the gross income to prove you could handle the expense. So going from a renter to a landlord was not only possible, it was your next step. And I believe we contacted Scott Anderson from Zion's Bank. We needed somebody to cut through the red tape and get appraisals and get an assessment. How did that conversation go with Scott Anderson?
Well, I'm glad that you bring this up because I think it's important to mention. We both have done business with Mr. Anderson, and
Hmm.
Mr. Anderson has always been there, and he's always. I remember Mr. Anderson giving me a business card saying, Jorge, if you ever need me, I'm here for you. And so I decided to use that card that he had given me because it was an emergency. And
Yes.
so I called and I contacted Scott Anderson, and the next I knew I was meeting with the Scott Anderson at the 14th floor of
Right.
Science Bank. And by the way, in the middle of a pandemic,
Right.
nobody but Mr. Anderson and the guard was there.
Right.
And the guard escorted me all the way up to the 14th floor to talk to Mr. Anderson. And that's how special I feel with the people that I'm surrounded by, that they've taken the time to see what a good friend may need. And and I had a conversation. I remember that it was in the middle of pandemic. We both were wearing a mask, and let's just face it. My thick accent with a mask can be a little overwhelming. But it was a great conversation, and he said, Jorge, you go and do what you need to do. I'll start talking to my people and see what we can do to help you out. And
So
he immediately had someone,
right.
Michael Brusuk, on
Hmm.
my side, and I was able to we were able to accomplish the purchase of that building, which now hosts Rico brand.
And the idea of it and the conversations that I ended up having with Scott is it's really refreshing to see somebody that embraces small business, understanding the need for capital, and when somebody has a proven track record like you, that it's not a dangerous investment. It's not a risky investment investing in you. You end up getting that done. You save the business. You open up. Is business better now than it was before this all occurred?
It is better now, and it's better now for different factors. One of them, obviously, is COVID-19.
Right?
People, they have a
Hmm.
need for, for ready to eat
Right?
food, prepare foods, and that sector of the of that sector of business has grown dramatically, and I happen to be in that business. The second one too is, I my expenses are to a minimum. We fit that building to the T, to the point where we don't need. Do I need to stop, brother?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay, sorry. To the point where I don't need to. Uh, my expenses are just what we need. I made a pretty clear decision on those days, on that day, David, and that was that when I had to leave that old building, I have decided to only bring with me
Right.
what I would use in the future. And I'm telling you, I think it's important for me to mention this because how many of us are hoarders,
Right.
and in more ways than one.
Hmm.
And I don't think that people understand how hard it is to carry and to have everything that you have accumulated for years. I mean, God knows how many thousands I left behind and how many thousands I let other restaurants owners have.
Right.
In fact, one of them, is a good friend of mine, and he opened his restaurant last week. And so at the end of the day, I decided to have a clean cut, you know,
Hmm.
give some of that equipment so to people for people that could use that equipment. But also, the most important part is not to bring with me anything that
Right.
wouldn't hinder my growth.
Exactly. And there was a time issue. I'd like to conclude our conversation today by just making a couple of comments and asking you one more question. But the transition occurred because you never gave up. Giving up just wasn't part of the conversation ever. And, when I think of a quote, one of my favorite quotes, I think of you and others that have the same entrepreneurial spirit that we do. And that's some see things as they are and ask why. Woe is me. Others dream dreams that never were and say, why not? Why not me? And you fit in the second category. Why not me? I'd like to end the program for you to talk just a little bit about that sleeve tattoo that's on your right arm. Tell us what that all means and close with there's a phrase you have on it. Tell me what that means to you.
Well, um, this has been a beautiful conversation to have with you because it's very seldom that I sit down and I explain, my journey, and it's especially um, only fair to mention that the reason why I have this phrase on my arm is because when you are someone that doesn't give up, when you are someone that not only dreams but makes those dreams reality, when you are someone that realizes that opportunities are all over the place and always tap into those opportunities, the last thing that you need to do is not to be grateful of what you have and the friends that you're surrounded by and the blessings that you have.
Right.
So the phrase that my arm has is pay it forward.
Pay it forward.
Pay it forward. And I decided
Perfect.
to create the Pay It Forward Award. And I decided to give it to these people who really are small business thinkers and small
Yes.
business, pro small business, such as you, Kathy Stevensons, Scott Andersons, the Pattersons, and a couple of other people out there. And we still are going to be giving the Pay It Forward Awards to those who really help a small business in Utah.
And just in closing, that recognition is a bobble doll of Jorge himself with his sleeve tattoo, Pay It Forward. Jorge, it's been a pleasure to have you on the program, and I tell you what, you are an example of what makes America strong. And the folks that come here and contribute, and you've contributed, and I've contributed. I love being American, and I know you love being an American. I love the way that America used to be and can be again. Thank you for being on our program.
Thank you so much, David Ibarra. I appreciate everything you do.